I thought I'd actually put up my editorial experience on the board there. So I've been an associate editor for more than 18 years now, so I've seen a lot of papers come over my desk. And so, you know, I'm happy to answer, so I'll give a bit of a presentation, but once we get to the discussion, I'm very happy to frankly answer any questions that you might have. Let's just say it's Chatham House rules, which means don't quote me, but yeah, very happy to answer any questions. So my first AE job was in management science, but actually in the stochastic models and simulation department. Then I was in the operations department. Now I'm actually back in the stochastic models and simulation department, although department editors don't always stick to their pool of AEs, so I get papers from both departments anyway. I'm on operations research, that's the operations and supply chain department. I'm on MSOM, which doesn't have assigned editors to departments. They now have departments, but they don't assign associate editors to them. And I'm on POMS in the manufacturing operations department. And then a couple of minor things. My role in all of these four is the same. So you submit your paper to a department editor. The department editor picks me or someone else. I then pick 2 or 3 referees, depending on the journal, or desk reject if I don't think it should go out for review. Something hidden behind the scenes is sometimes the department editor will email me saying, I don't really think this should go out to review. If you agree, please write a short report. So sometimes the desk reject is actually mostly from the department editor, but you know, you can't just say no, go away. You need to actually write something, so the department editor will make his life a little easier and it's if you don't agree, send it out to reviewers. So yeah, so assuming it doesn't get desk reject, it gets sent out to reviewers. Reviewers come back. I make a recommendation, but it's only a recommendation. It goes up to the department editor, who mostly follows my recommendation, but sometimes can overturn it one way or the other. On top of all the department editors, there's an editor-in-chief for these journals, but he doesn't get involved with the day-to-day accept-reject decisions. So he's more setting the strategy, picking the department editors, and getting involved for exception processes, which there are exception processes. So yeah, so that's my role. How do I pick reviewers? Well, most of these journals ask you to suggest reviewers. I always go to that list first. I usually try and make sure at least one of the people on that list is actually from the list of recommended reviewers. And then obviously one has to have read the paper before you can send it out, because you don't know if it's a desk reject or not. So having read the paper, it's pick someone who's kind of in that general area. So you know, I'm sort of inside the system, and from my perspective, the system mostly works. So my view is there's not that much bias in the system, and obviously I am biased in that opinion. What happens differently with a big name person? I tend to be a little more careful in the reviewers I pick. I'm not going to pick someone I have no idea who they are. I have no idea if they're going to do a good job or not. But I don't particularly look for easy people. It's just you want someone who's actually competent and is going to give a quality review. And I tend to be a little easier on my decision recommendations for assistant professors who haven't yet made tenure. So there is a little bit of a pro-junior people bias, and I know I'm not the only person who does that. So that's the good news for the junior people in the room. There is actually a little bit of a, you know, if you're ruining someone's career here, and this paper is in the grey area, you might tip it slightly. But it's only if it's in that very grey area. If it's, you know, it's a clear either way, then it's a clear either way. So I've got a few slides to talk about from management science and MSOM. I know POMS is going to come later, and I doubt there's too many here who publish in OR, but happy to talk about it if you're interested. The slides I have come directly from the MSOM business meeting at the Informs conference that was just a couple of months ago. So these are directly from the editor-in-chief, what he presented at the conference. So Chris Tang is the editor-in-chief of MSOM. manufacturing service operations management. So for those who don't know, in the US, INFORMS is the Institute for Operations and Research and Management Science. Within INFORMS there are societies. One of the societies is MSOM. This is the journal of the MSOM Society. It's about, I think it started in 2000. So here's the data. Its cycle times are not as good as they used to be. There's their different departments and the percentage of things being sent into those different departments. It's a fairly small journal, so 252 new submissions as of August, so more than that in a year, but so growing a bit. Acceptance rate 15% higher than the 10% in 2016, and 70 days, but as he points out, there's a bit of a tail, and that's just of course for first review. And that's an average, so all those desk rejects that take a week or two get to bring down that average. It's apparently on the rise. Again, these are the slides prepared by the editor-in-chief. It's been added to the FT50 list, which is now an FT50 list. Fine. So what are they doing? They've changed their requirements for abstracts. That's a pretty detailed thing, but now you have to go through those 5 pieces explicitly. They're doing all sorts of outreach. Here's some more outreach. They've started a practice-based research competition. So if you are actually doing practice-based research, there's a competition you might think about entering. So the first one was this year, but they plan it to be an annual competition, I believe. Special issue just finished on responsible operations. 2018 special issue on sharing innovative and innovative marketplaces. And they've now, and in fact this has been announced since the meeting, there's an open competition with a bunch of industry data. So there's this massive data dump out there that any researcher can take. I mean, you have to sign up. Any researcher can take, explore, and then write a paper and join the competition. Of course, everybody's using the same data set, so it's a little risky, but it's kind of cool. So that was MSOM, Management Science. These slides were prepared by Tech Ho, who was the editor-in-chief then. We just got the announcement that David Simke-Levy is taking over as the editor-in-chief at the end of this year. Many of you will know his name from Supply Chain World, the Supply Chain World. They again show impact factors. They have a goal to increase. Number of submissions is growing. OM is not the biggest department. Finance is actually the biggest department in management science. Behavioral economics is actually quite high. Their cycle times are looking really nice. Again, these are averages that include the short ones. And I think, they have been really quite serious about trying to keep their cycle times short. One of the things they do is they go out for 3 reviewers, and if the 3rd reviewer is late and you've got 2 reports that are sufficient, you just go with the 2 reports. So that's one thing that helps prevent the long tails. So that's the departments within management science. And acceptance rates. They're trying to decrease acceptance rates. I would notice that this is an average across all departments. The acceptance rate in OM is actually much lower than that. So because it's not, management science is less seen as a top journal in, say, finance, even though they get all these papers, versus an OM. So the acceptance rates in OM are lower and definitely meeting the 7.5%. So that was a bit about those 2 journals. Don't really have much time left, but just a few thoughts. There's a lot of papers that get rejected purely because the person didn't write it well enough, and it's always sad to see that because it's completely unnecessary. And sometimes I will send it back without sending it out for review, saying, get some advice on how to write this. but often it goes out for review and you can kind of predict that the reviewers don't quite get it because it's not quite written right. So my advice to any junior academics in the room is never submit a paper without having a senior person read it first, and a senior person ideally from that field, because it's really hard to write for a field you're not familiar with. There's norms that you just don't know, there's what needs to be explained, what doesn't need to be explained, how do you actually lay things out. Very, very different in different fields or different methodologies. So a JOM paper versus a management science paper are written two completely different ways. How do you choose where to send it? Well, you need to send it to somebody who likes that type of work. And how do you know they like it? Well, that's what they do, right? People tend to like the work they do. So if they've never written a paper using this particular methodology, it's a bit dangerous to send it to them because maybe they don't quite understand it, maybe they don't like it. And then the final bullet there, my pet peeve, don't list your friends as potential reviewers. First of all, I think it's mildly unethical. But second, they're not going to get chosen if they're your friends and not in your area. Fine if they're in your area. But some people seem to list people who, you know, they went to the same graduate school as them, but they work in deterministic optimization and this paper's a queuing paper. It's like, why did you list them? I'm not going to send it to somebody who knows nothing about queuing, right? So, so be a bit more thoughtful with the reviewers because they're very useful. They tell the AE, where do you see your contribution? What type of person can read and evaluate this paper? So you need to be thoughtful about those people. So that was all I was going to say.
Right. Thanks very much, Sarah. Howdy.
Howdy.
Some of them are trained from this morning. In Texas, we start off our sessions by saying howdy, and then the audience responds howdy. Right, so howdy. Thanks very much for being here. My name is Zeng. I'm a professor of supply chain management at Texas A&M University. I'm a member of the editorial board for POM, but I served in many different roles across different journals. For instance, I'm an associate editor for Decision Sciences. I was an associate editor for, I am an associate editor of Journal of Supply Chain Management, Journal of Business Logistics. I served JOM for quite a few years as an associate editor, and I'm also I serve as a member of the editorial board for many different other journals. So overall, I will echo the same comments that you alluded to earlier. Same kind of issues. I have a slide. It's almost like we cooperated to build that slide. All right. So POM, I have the impact factor, the latest one that we had. It's a journal that is departmental in structure. I'm going to show you the structure of the journal in a few minutes. Essentially, Production Operations Management Journal is the leading journal of the Production Operations Management Society. And we publish papers across the entire spectrum, whether you have an empirical piece, survey-based, whether you have case study, or if you want to write a stochastic type of a paper, or deterministic, or queuing. We welcome all kinds of traditions within the supply chain management / operations management domain. As I said, the structure is hierarchical. The editor-in-chief doesn't really call the shots on a day-to-day basis. In essence, it's more of a strategist, the same way as management science. On an exception basis, the editor-in-chief may handle the papers of a departmental editor, because the departmental editors still need to publish themselves, right? So how do you make a decision who is going to serve as the editor of that paper? So in essence, within POM, the departmental editors are the ones that actually have the discretion to call the shots, right? Whether you're going to get the revised and resubmit, or rejection, or desk rejection, they make the call. Within POM, associate editors are actually called senior editors, right? And then under the senior editors, we have essentially the members of the editorial board. Okay. Now these are the different the different departments within POM. Sort of the same idea as management science. There is quite a few of them that touch on all kinds of areas within the domain of supply chain operations management. As you can see, it's pretty broad. And if I were to give you some of the statistics, it's amazing. 2016, 869 submissions, pretty close to what it was in 2015, 700 in 2014. These numbers are extraordinary. I mean, I saw management science is in the thousands. This wasn't the case. I mean, you go back 10, 15 years ago, I remember JOM, we used to get a couple of hundred papers a year. Decision science is 150 to 200 papers a year. And then what happens once you get this level of volume, you can imagine the task of the editors. Because for every paper, you're going to have to send it out and at least secure 2 definite reviewers. But in order to get 2 reviewers, you probably have to send the paper maybe to 4 or 5 people before the 2 people are going to say, okay, I'll do the job. Given the volume, sometimes we don't make optimal selections because you just have to find somebody that is willing to do the job. And sometimes you're going to get a review, one of the reviewers is going to say, this is the perfect paper. I would even give conditional acceptance right now. And then you see the next reviewer and says, this is the worst paper ever. I don't know, did it ever happen to you that you have 2 reviewers that are totally contradicting? Well, sometimes because of volume, even though we try to make the best selections, it's just a matter of volume sometimes. And as an editor, you also have, in the background, you have that clock that is ticking in terms of the review time, right? You don't want to take forever until you find a reviewer. So anyway, if you look at out of 869 submissions in 2016, 149 papers moved to the second round. Typically, where it is JOM, POM, and I'm not sure about management science, you have a 50% attrition rate in terms of desk rejections. Out of 100 papers, we get 50% die on arrival. And we're going to talk a little bit later on, perhaps, as to why those papers die right there and then. If you look at the acceptance, 2016, there were 100 papers out of 869 that got accepted. So roughly it's about the same acceptance rate as management science, 11.51%. And the acceptance rates, again, it's in the neighborhood of 11.5% or so to 12 point something. So it's still relatively low. We're running also beyond the regular issues. There are some special issues. In fact, there is a special issue going on right now. If you're interested, you can go check it out. The length, POM is very particular about the length of the paper. 38 pages, all-inclusive, on 11-point font. And I did get my papers, in fact, I came back and they said, well, your font was a little bit smaller or whatever, or your margins are not exact, and you have to go back and fix all of those. On an exception basis, a department editor may allow you to have a longer paper, but in general, it's 38 pages all-inclusive. However, with POM, you get to designate some appendices that can go online, and the length of those appendices is sort of unlimited. So if you have a lot of stuff that is sort of peripheral, is not essential, you can put those into an appendix, an online appendix. What are we looking for? Number one, what's your value proposition, right? What are you trying to serve the audience? Why should we spend time reading your paper? So if you're not gonna be able to demonstrate that there is some value right here, your paper is doomed, right? In general, motivation is critical. Just you have to motivate, and I'm gonna explain it a little bit more. Sometimes you read the introduction and people say, well, this is the first study that is looking at this issue. And it's like, so what? Maybe it's not important enough of an issue, and that's why nobody else looked at it. It doesn't justify all by itself to have your paper. So what's your value proposition here, right? What is something unique? How do you add value to the literature? In my view, some of the most important things is the abstract and the introduction. That's the first thing I do when I get a paper to look at is the abstract and the introduction. If you fail to captivate me using your abstract or your introduction, you're going to have a hard time convincing me later on, right? So whatever you do, that abstract and that introduction have to really be attractive in order for the reader to continue reading. So what happens psychologically, if you're not going to convince me early on that this is worthy, what happens is that we look for reasons to kill your paper instead of looking for reasons to make it a better paper, right? So behind the, if you look at, if there was a way to look at our brains, right? We can act as constructively or destructively, if you will. Destructively is not the best choice of words, but this is what is happening, right? If this is a topic that is, in French, is called démodé. Anybody knows what it means?
Out of fashion.
Yeah.
Out of fashion, right? If it is out of fashion, if it is a topic, you know, somebody testing resource-based view of the firm, transaction cost economics, we've seen it. The horse is dead, right? We don't want to see one more paper with transaction cost economics and some of those, unless you have something really special to tell us, right? You have to have the preponderance, as the lawyers would say, the preponderance of the evidence that this is such a valuable paper that it deserves the space in this journal, even though it's using transaction cost economics, right? So the burden is on you to motivate us to look for opportunities to be constructive. In other words, we want to help you. Maybe we see something, it's not a perfect paper, but we see some value into a new topic, new methodology that we'd like to promote. Somehow it didn't print all the way here. Check your English before submission. You can imagine the frustration. We're all volunteers in this business, right? And I don't want to be distracted. Every other sentence I have to correct something, where it is the choices of words, where it is misspelling, where it is the syntax. Make sure, like you mentioned earlier, either hire an editor that can help you, or even better, find somebody else that works in that area and is from an English-speaking country if you're going to submit it to an English sort of journal, and make sure even that person, just because speak English doesn't mean that they write well. So make sure you choose somebody that writes very well. Actually, maybe I'm going to delay this after everybody has the opportunity, because I have a paper right now which is under review in one of the major journals. I don't want to tell you which one, but it's a very lengthy paper. It's about 75 pages long. We're positive it's going to get in. We don't know 100% yet, but it summarizes sort of the performance of management science, POM, MSOM, and JOM for the last 20 years in terms of who are the most productive individuals, who are the most productive institutions, what is the network of the top people. And we actually use sort of social network analysis, and we can map the networks. And we use more of a, we have a static perspective, and then we have a dynamic perspective. In other words, in the last 20 years, if, for instance, one individual left from one university and went to another university, what happens in terms of the productivity of the previous institution and the new institution? But I'll wait for this until everybody has a chance to present. Thank you.
Thanks.